Hey everybody, welcome back to the Callous Adv Legends series. This is going to be a good one. Here today with someone who is very difficult to get on the microphone, one of competitive Pokemon's all-time best players, ADV or otherwise, my good friend ABR. Thank you very much for taking some of the time and being here with me today. Very excited for the interview.
Hello. I'm very excited to get this going. I haven't been on YouTube a whole lot, but I'm excited and grateful for the opportunity to just chat with one of my longtime friends, Mr. Callous.
Mutual pleasure, man. And I assume that most people watching this are familiar with you. You've been on my channel quite a bit, but in case anyone is out there watching doesn't know who you are, could you please just give us a brief intro about yourself?
All right, let's see. Pokemon wise, I've pretty much always went by ABR. Um, Started playing like competitive Pokemon 2013, 2014 ish. I don't know if anyone actually knows Battle of the viewers, but do you know it personally?
Pokeball?
It was like
No.
an offshoot simulator made by Philip 7086 and some others, but it only lasted like a year and change. They kind of had like a draft point system, but like for your team. So your team total could only have like 600 points,
Huh.
and like a legendary could be like 300, but something terrible could be like 5. So
Huh.
it was XYOU. Yeah. So that's when I started, and then when that kind of shut down is when I moved to Showdown and Smogon, and yeah, that was about like 2014, 2015 ish.
And then
And I've
what do
been
you.
playing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, what did you say?
Well, I was going to say, what are you comfortable telling us outside of Pokemon? I mean, you're American. What else?
Yes, a proud American at that. Um, I'm 26. I've lived in New York pretty much my whole life, except a brief stint in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, yeah, that's the basics. 26-year-old New York dude.
Fair enough. Oh boy, where to begin with you? You have quite the career, quite the resume. I guess we'll start at the beginning. So, what got you into competitive Pokemon in the first place? How old were you about at the time? And of all the things that a young guy, a teenager, could get into, what made you choose this? What made this appealing to you?
So before Pokemon, actually, I was mainly playing the Halo series.
Ooh.
Um, you familiar?
Oh, yeah, the shooters on Xbox?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I love that shit. So it started playing that casually, and then I got into the whole like clan scene, and I didn't go to MLG events or anything, but I was playing online some pretty intense stuff, and then I got into like YouTube, not like on other people's channels, I guess, like montages and clip making and all that stuff. And I guess while I was getting more into YouTube, I came across some Pokemon YouTubers, which would be the Flaming Spade,
Oh, jeez, we're
uh,
going way back.
Pokeaim,
Yeah.
and Wild Chase. Was that the other one? That I think that was the name of that one. And this was kind of like late DPP, early Black White era. Um, and I just thought it was really cool. Oh, you know what? Imp Knight, him too. He he had those like baton pass sweeps, and all the cool moments in black and white, and I'm like, shit, that's cool. I gotta get on the simulator and try some out for myself. And I came across Showdown, started playing the ladder, found the forums, and yeah, that's about it.
So you said that was what, 2013? So you were what, maybe 16, 17, high school-ish at the time?
I was born in '98, so yeah, like when I was 15 or so, high school.
So did you have any
You know, when I wasn't.
Pokemon background prior to that? Did you play the cartridge games or any of that?
Yeah. So my first game, I remember this vividly. It was after my first day of kindergarten. My mom took me to PC Richard and Son, and there I bought a silver Game Boy Advanced SP and Pokemon Sapphire. I vividly remember that whole day. I remember going home and picking between my starters, and I did end up going with the Blaziken line. Um, and that game was just incredible to me. And I was so into it, and I played hundreds of hours. And then I went back and played Silver, and then I played my brother's Red cartridge. And after that, we all played Emerald together. And funnily enough, now that we're talking from an ADV point of view, I actually remember Emerald as like by far the best Pokemon game I played. I even played Pearl after. Honestly, some people might disagree. To me, it was mediocre, and I couldn't even finish it. So the Gen 3 games stood out as my favorites for sure.
Okay, so you didn't start from zero. You had something of a Pokemon background. You just
Oh,
didn't venture into the competitive aspect of it.
no, that wasn't until I was like 15 or so.
So once you did dip your toes in competitively, what comes to mind when I ask you about the early days? What are some of those your favorite memories from the early days? Some of the first people that you got to know, became friends with, way back at the beginning when you started competitively.
Okay, so there was this group on Showdown called BOF Based OU Friends.
Okay,
Um,
never heard of it.
I honestly couldn't tell you a ton of people who were in there, or honestly many who are around today, but it was basically just like an XYOU/ORSOU laddering click kind of thing. Um, with like a sort of focus on tournaments, but like people in there weren't really good enough to be in all the tournaments.
Uh
And it
huh.
wasn't until the official ladder tournament in 2015, I believe, that I finally qualified and like got my start in tournaments. And at that point, there was a whole Skype group and everything of friends I made at that point, and like discussing teams to use in the ladder tournament, both the ladder stage and in the later bracket stage, and then from there you make friends, SPL, World Cup, and all that. So I guess I really got my feet dipped into tournaments like the turn of 2016.
Want to name drop a couple of those early friends, maybe that my viewers would be familiar with?
Sure. Of course, the famous Thunder Blunder, um, Starmaster, TDK, CBB, Tony Flygon, Kratos Mana, McMegan, people I'm still friends with to this day.
And you've known all those guys since all the way back then, 2016 ish, 17.
Yeah, and honestly, been some of my best friends ever since.
Yeah, it's one of the beautiful things with Pokemon. You get these long-standing relationships, and you look back and you're like, man, I've known this guy for 10 years now, or longer in some
Yeah.
cases.
I think I mentioned it to you briefly, but this is the same group of people I actually went to Portugal with over the summer. Um, so a lot of these people, we did a whole trip to Portugal for like 10 days in August, and it was incredible. Like I met some of them before, like Star, met since he's close to New York. But this it was my first time meeting a lot of people who I've spoken to like almost daily for 8 years. So it's an incredible experience, and I definitely recommend people, getting up and meeting their online friends when they have the opportunity to.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, Pokemon players meeting each other, you hear those stories, but a whole group of you getting together and
We got the whole Airbnb and everything, and exploring another country together was, yeah, definitely a memorable experience
yeah, something you'll remember for the rest of your life, I would imagine.
for sure.
So something interesting with you, because as you know, this is obviously an ADV focused series. I'm more of an ADV guy. But you took a different path than most people. You by the time you really got into ADV and started taking it seriously, you were already established. You already had tournament wins. You were already a hot commodity in SPL. You were well known for your Gen 7 and your Fairy Gens at that time. So I guess that leaves a couple of questions. First of all, what made you branch away from that and go into ADV in the first place? And then looking at that unique path as to how you got here, what advantages or disadvantages do you think that that gave you, starting with something totally different from ADV and then working your way backwards?
All right, so let me, I guess, take that one part at a time. So the first part of how it started. So at the time, I started as an ORS Gen 6 player, and then when Gen 7 came out, I was focusing on that. And I want to say it was a combination of my World Cups with BKC, and my SPLs with Fear and Ostamatitos. And at that point, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about ADV. But honestly, my personal, I guess, just behavior. Myself, I'm not the type of person to just leave my teammates on their own. Even if they're great, smart guys, I'm the type to try and get involved and help where I can, even if I'm not formerly familiar with the tier. So I remember just like trying to learn from these guys. And I would like to say, even by the later ends of those seasons, that they would appreciate my input in the tiers as well. And I feel like those experiences with them in particular both gave me a reason to learn, but also helped me learn itself by being such great minds.
And that's on Wolfpack, correct?
Yeah, so the Asta and Fear was on the SPL 9 Wolfpack in 2018, and BKC, I first teamed with him in 2017.
Is that also Wolfpack?
No, that was World Cup, so East.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And the next part of your question, well, does that I guess sufficiently answer the how did it happen
I sure
in
think
your
so.
opinion?
But I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really about me,
Yeah, I
man.
mean, it was no. I'm just curious. Yeah, I mean, I guess I learned it that way. And I was the type, to join any real tournament. So with my growing knowledge of old generations from those team tournaments with my teammates, I want to say the first I played your Invitational 2, which was 2018 or 2017.
I should know the answer to that, but I don't. 18
All right,
sounds 18 sounds right, but time flies.
okay. All right, so 2018 is Callous Invitational 2. I think I was invited just as like a current gen player who's like overall good, so give him a shot in ADV kind of thing.
Pretty much.
But I went like 1-2. I remember I think Dan and UD smoked me in unclose series, and yeah, kind of a middling run then. But after that, I got more experience in ADV. The year after, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, is when I had the better Callous Invitational 3 run, and I also made Classic Playoffs for the first time. So 2019 is when I really started getting good at ADV and old gens in general. As for the other question of do I think it helped me? I do think it did help me. I think nowadays people are pretty good at I mean it depends. There are some people who just like plug and play the known good teams from other people they like view as better than themselves at a tier, and then other people who have their own unique takes. But in my case, I absolutely wanted. I know it almost felt necessary to have my own unique take on the metagame and metagames in general, because I feel like if I'm just taking what the people before me did and copying it set for set, team for team, then like what separates me from them, especially when they have more experience doing that exact thing. So to me, it felt necessary to do it my own way because that's the only way I'll get above them eventually. Um, so I had valued advice from the established ADV players at the time, but I was never, you know, viewed someone else as my never wrong teacher, and they know better than me, so I'll just follow them. I needed my own spin on it.
How much of an adjustment was it for you? I mean, no team preview, physical special split, just different mechanics, just a different world from Gen 6, Gen 7 that you're used to. No megas, any of that.
It is different in that sense, but in those gens, I was still setting my spikes with Skarmory and pivoting to Blissey or a Blissey equivalent like Clefable, and the fundamentals are there. You see it these days with, I guess you could say, like Empo has done a similar thing. He's not like too deep in the ADV community, but he's mainly a current gen player, and you know, recently solid to ADV too. So I think if you're fundamentally good at Pokemon and you put the if you have the time, motivation, and effort to learn another generation, then it's only a matter of time until you actually crack it.
Yeah, so I guess asking that question in reverse, I mean, if there were a current ADV player trying to improve, would you recommend to them to actually try out a different generation? Do you think it would benefit them in any way to go ahead and just learn Gen 7, Gen 8? Do you think that would benefit their ADV in any way?
Yes, I do. It's hard to think of a tangible example. It doesn't have to be a specific like, oh, I got this tech from Gen 8 and now I'm going to apply it to Gen 3. But I think when you broaden your perspective and play other formats, it can kind of, just click something in your brain and open you to new possibilities. I'd say it's the same with real life. If you feel like you're stuck in a rut and then you travel locally, internationally, and see something new, it can change your mindset for the better and open you up to new things. So I definitely, if you have the motivation, I recommend it as an experience to try different formats to play. And it's also just fun, learning different things.
So you touched on it, but we'll start with Callous Invitational since you have a number of impressive finishes there. CI2 you said was your first one, and yep, 1-2, which, hey, okay
Yeah,
for a first outing, but obviously not what you're aiming for. The next year, CI3, money finish, third place. This is 2019-ish. So at that
yeah.
time, what do you remember about that run, the CI3 third place run, and how would you say your level was of ADV at that time as compared to what it is now? What did you still need to improve on? Overall, what do you remember about that particular tournament?
All right. So I think from CI2 to CI3, not just the finishing different, but like I just learned way more. In CI2, I actually vividly remember just like loading whatever ScarMag BKC gave me, and not really having any idea of like how the tier works on a deep level. And then CI3, I really thought like, okay, like time to make your own teams, play your own way, and really give it an honest shot. I want to say I faced, and I don't know if you have this somewhere. Uh, M Dragon. This could be out of order. I want to say M Dragon, Tama, PCG, ooh, ZF, uh, and then Triangles and Asta. I could be wrong on the ZF one, but does that
I mean, that's a murderous row of opponents if that's what you're
yeah,
if that's what the lineup was.
it's at least five of those six. So I was facing good opponents too, um, and I remember thinking, like it's a really sick tournament. There's money. There's all these good players, and of course, me having an ego, it's like I want to show all these ADV players that a new gen guy can do it too. Um, and yeah, I really started building my own teams each round, like scouting opponent tendencies, practicing test games. Was really getting into it, but still, someone who's not like I don't know. I still got third place. I was obviously pretty good. But compared to now, I feel like back then I knew nothing. So definitely since then I've grown a lot more as a person and an ADV player. I feel like the main difference is while I did build my own teams back then, they were much more limited in their range. Um, and I'm sure we'll touch on this later, but I feel like right now I have a reputation of being able to use anything, and that absolutely works in my advantage. Back then, I was much more limited. Like I'd use an offense, so to speak, but let's say it still only fit a very specific mold, and otherwise it was just basic Skarmbliss with no real change up and like Tyranitar on every team still. So um, I think that I remember Triangles got some crazy good matchups into me. Not that he didn't play well, but I just remember his teams. I just felt like helpless versus them. And that was my first series loss that tour. And it's like that was kind of a start of a wake up call that I need to start changing what I use if I want to get better than third place.
With that point in particular, did you feel like it was just, a coincidence, matchups happen, this is just part of the game, or did you feel like maybe he kind of had your number, he was kind of counter teaming you, he kind of knew what you were gonna do and exploited it.
Yes, no, it definitely felt like a specific, like I was too predictable and got fucked up for it, you know? Um, yes, I'd say there are some instances where it's just a coincidence shit happens, but this felt very specific. I want to say one game I used, I'm trying to remember this. I don't know if you have the replays on hand. I could probably find them in your server
In
too.
my server,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, he used this Donphan, Celebi, Umbreon, Snorlax,
Oh yeah.
Moltres team.
You know what?
Yeah,
When I interviewed him, he brought up this exact team, this exact game.
yeah. So I remember him using that, and me using this like offensive Starmie plus Gengar, maybe even a Skarmory too, and I was just like helpless to beat Umbreon and Snorlax. I just could not kill them, and that was that. Like I maybe like crit him with my Starmie at one point, and like it got close, but it was just too much to, and I lost. And then the other game, I just made some like terrible like Metagross, Zapdos, Magdoll, and I think he used spikes anyway and beat me because my team was just bad too. Yeah, so definitely remember those as just getting totally messed up. Um, and then I think by the point I had to like best of five Asta in the losers bracket, I was kind of I just like reused whatever I had just used in the classic playoffs, and then like the other teams. I felt like I kind of ran out of ideas and just like kind of loaded either bad teams or old teams, and it just wasn't clicking.
Do you feel at that time that you were at the same level as Asta?
No, no, definitely not. It was like nice that I got to beat the other good players prior, but uh, it I don't think at that point it was something I would have been able to like consistently reproduce. And Asta and Triangles beating me in retrospect was not a surprise at all at that time.
So moving along with the CI career, CI 4 you had a top 12 finish, not bad at all. CI 5 is probably one that you're pretty proud of. You were the
Yeah.
champion,
Uh huh.
undefeated, winners bracket. Very good.
I could probably remember every single team I used in that tournament. So that tournament's very clear in my mind.
Oh, that's
Mm.
great. Tell me all about it.
Oh boy, you want to hear? You want to test me?
Maybe not every
Um,
team, but
no, yeah.
I would love to know what you remember about that tournament, what stands out in
Okay.
your mind, some of your favorite
All right.
matches, the whole shebang.
Very. I'll tell you the very first game of the tournament versus Felix, who played on Monthly Girls. I remember that too. He was using SD Pass with Heracross. Selby SD Pass with Heracross, Magneton, Metagross, the whole thing.
This is all coming back.
Uh,
I feel like he almost beat you.
he okay. So game one, I had some Skarm Mag with DD Tar. I something happened early game. I don't know if like I had to roar the Metagross that got a boost and was agility or whatever, but I ended up like not getting spikes. And I was just I made it close. And like my DD Tar had a chance to win the game, but I was still like maneuvering around the Heracross with the Blissey team and no spikes up. And he beat me game one. And then game two, I said, like fuck that. The team was bad. Like let me load something I know is good. I loaded Zapdos, Doug Trio, Gengar, Suicune, Jirachi, Celebi. Um, he led with like Suicune. He went Blissey turn one. I did the whole beat up shebang, and that game was a wash. Game three, yeah, I said, you know what, fuck it. This team's great. I'm gonna load it again, and I loaded it again. He loaded some Kingdra thing, and I won with that team again. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I lost one game, but I got it back together. This feels good. Round two, I faced Malekith. Game one, I bring some, if you know the terminology, Virgin Stall. With are you familiar?
I do, but go ahead and tell our viewers if they don't.
Okay. So Virgin Stall, coined by McMegan in ADV, is Skarmory, Blissey, Claydol, Dugtrio, traditionally Suicune or Milotic, and then a last. So you call it V5 or Virgin 5, and then whatever last you want, just because it's, in his word, the Virginist playstyle. So I actually had a Vaporeon variant of that team as the mono water type. It was Wish, Protect, Surf, Roar, um, with Gengar last. And Malekith was using some agility, Zapdos agility past the Hariyama thing, and I won that very handily. he will probably tell you I got lucky with the crit or whatever, but in my view, it was just a really easy matchup. I won anyway. And then game 2, I brought that same Zap Doug offense from the previous round, just sticking with the team I like, and I won that as well. And then round 3,
Bye.
I faced Tricking. I admittedly um, brought some mediocre teams that series, lucked him in both games with a Swift 2-0. Maybe I could have won one of them, and like who knows that game 3 would have went. But I remember I it just got very lucky that series. Kind of bailed me out, but I was up in 3-0 bracket at that point, and round 4 versus H-Clat, which I'm sure you remember a little bit. This was around the time we were playing around with baton pass rule sets, and I think Smogon at the time still allowed you to bring 3 baton passers. But in your tournament, you had limited it to 2. Does that sound correct?
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Okay. So at that point, I myself didn't want to use your version of baton pass because I guess it felt like a successful nerf to it. But in like, you remember it was called Mead Pass at that point. It was like Zapdos, Vaporeon, Hypno. And you would either try to pass your defense boost up to like a Belly Drum, Marowak, or Hariyama, or you pass your Combine boost to a Jirachi in the end. And that, honestly, that team was super hard to beat. I would, get an easy 30-0 ladder run, whatever with it. I even brought it in classic top 8. But in your tournament, I didn't really want to bring Baton Pass, but I still tried to, you know, keep my eye out for it if I saw something funky. Basically, game 1 versus H-Clat, I had Virgin again with my Lodic this time, with Gengar last. He used Jumpluff. Um, the game was close. I got kind of quote unquote unlucky with like a Milotic versus DD Tar thing, but that's how it goes, and I lost. Game 2, I brought Tyranitar, Moltres, Zapdos, Superman. He used the triple rock spam, Tar Arrow, and Aggron, actually. I won that pretty handily, and game 3 is where it gets funky. He had an early game Heracross Breloom with Zapdos lead, and I was like really ahead. I used the old team Beer Lover with Starmie, Gengar, Tyranitar, Blissey, Swampert, Skarm. I might have said something twice there, but
Nope, you,
you
you
know
got
the
them.
drill.
You got them all.
Yeah, yeah. But I used a Choice Bantar and T-Wave Starmie version. So I was like super ahead in the early game. And I managed to like kill both fighting types and like caught him on double switch, whatever. But then Zapdos comes in agility, so I'm like, paused, stuff might get funky now. And it was also non-leftover Zapdos, so at the time, people often ran like the whatever the special defense boosting berry is, apricot, or I don't know what it is. And if they had like a non-leftover Zapdos, you knew it was probably like a baton pass strategy. Um, so I'm like, okay, you know what? This is tough to maneuver, but like I know there's a Marowak in the back somewhere, but like let's just see how it goes. He passes to Mawile of all things, which is the new strategy he adopted because of the baton pass limit you had. Um, and I think it also gets Iron Defense in this gen. And basically, with Zapdos speed, and then you can intimidate and try to pass to Marowak and SD. I think he got one SD off as I go Skarmory. And at this point, I knew that some Marowaks ran Focus Punch to beat out Skarm's Roar if you can't bait it earlier. But obviously, you don't want to get caught drill pecking on like Rock Slide / HP Rock either, because then you could lose that way. So it was 50-50s of sorts. The first time I drill pecked on his Focus, because I guess he didn't know I knew Focus, whatever. And then I roared on his HP Rock, and that like sealed the game. And I remember fist bumping, to myself in my room so vividly, because like, holy fuck, I just beat that. I won. I secured money. I'm in the winner's bracket. I can win this shit. And I remember like topping off to Markop in PM because he also just beat Star, and we were like, fuck yeah, now we get to play next week and blah blah blah. And it was just that was like, even though that wasn't finals, that was probably the most tense game and series of that tournament. And I definitely remember that happening. And then I faced Markop in winners finals and grand finals, and to humbly brag, I beat him in 5 straight games, and I didn't lose again since the HCLAT game 1. And I felt very on top of my game at that point, and I won Classic that year too. So I feel like at that point I was like really in my groove, on top of my ADV. I won all 4 ADV games in Classic playoffs, and I was just I felt like untouchable in the tier at that point.
And then the next 2 years, you
And,
went out with 1-2 records twice in a row, CI6, CI7. What happened?
yep. What happened? I think, not to make excuses, but my motivation took a little bit of a shot.
Sure.
So I was like still building new teams, maybe laddering a bit for fun, but I wasn't in like the full grind set mentality. Um, I think with me, honestly, and it happened in gym tournament, which we'll get to, is I'm not a big losers run kind of guy. if I lose earlier in the tournament, then it's like, there's a lot of games to go. Not feeling super motivated to it. Maybe I'll like play earlier, like not on the weekend, and like use whatever teams. And yeah, so maybe like I won round 1, but then lost round 2, and already at that point it's like, all right, this is not really built for those 11 round runs. So yeah, just kind of lost steam. I think I lost to Dice in one of them, Water Mess in another, Kurtz, and Mana in those 2 tournaments. Yeah, so just mediocre tours, but shit happens.
Right. The point is that it can happen to anybody, even somebody as good as you. So
Yeah,
I hope people listening to this don't get discouraged when they have a bad tour. It happens to ABR, to McMegan, to everybody. It's just part of the game.
yeah, not everyone can be can win the whole tournament every time. And if you go negative or in a team tournament or in a invitational or whatever, it's there's always the next one.
So, a fun fact for the viewers at home, this interview has been in the works. We've been planning this for weeks, like over a month now, but we deliberately held off until after Invitational, Gym Tour, whatever you want to call it, concluded because ABR was in the winners bracket at the time. Possibility, makes another run. If he does well, maybe we talk about it during this interview. Well, guess what? As you guys might know, he went ahead and won that tournament as well. Invitational champions. So if you're counting that as an extension of Callous Invitational, which I sure do, that makes
I do as
ABR,
well, for the
yeah,
record.
then that makes ABR one of just 2 players in the history of the tournament to win the tournament twice, him and Lanier, and one of just 3 players in the tournament, him, Lanier, and Mana, to make money 3 times. So historic victory as far as I was concerned, but the thing for people who don't really care as much about the history that probably really stood out to most of my audience, the casual audience, isn't even just that you won, it's how you won. It's the fact that in the second set of the grand finals, after losing the first set of grand finals, you decided that you wanted to bring 0 Tyranitar, 0 Skarmory, 0 Swampert. I mean that I
You
could
got that right.
I could see the heads exploding of my less experienced, my casual ADV audience at home. It just that's inconceivable to them with this stereotype for ADV that Big 5, TSS, that's the whole format. It's the best thing. Everything else is worse. That's clearly not the way that you approach the grand finals. So we certainly need to talk about that. 0 Tar, 0 Skarm, 0 Swampert. What led you to not bringing what many people would consider 3 of the 5 top Pokemon, perhaps the 1 and 2 Pokemon, T-Tar, Skarmory, in the tier? Were you trying to send a message or make a statement? Were you doing that to show off? How did we get there?
All right, so I'm going to take you briefly back in history, though. So we're talking about Kyle's Invitational 5. And I remember some parts of my usage from that tournament. I played 15 games total. Would you like to take a guess at what my most used Pokemon was?
Skarmory.
Doug Trio. I
Really?
I used 9 Doug Trio in my 15 games in your Callous Invitational 5.
That's 60% for those of you at home.
Yeah. Skarmory was second, for the record.
Okay, that's close.
Actually, yes. So it was a lot of Doug Trio offense and otherwise just Skarmory teams. I, for those who are not as embedded in the ADV community, have a reputation of being a Skarm 1 truther. Um, I feel like 3 years ago, even, it was pretty unanimous. Like, it's ADV, you put Tyranitar 1, and that's life, you know? Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I would think the majority of people still feel that way.
Yes, but I want to say 1 year ago, 2 years ago or so, there started being some legitimacy to the SCARM 1 movement. And now I want to say in recent VR submissions, like, I don't know, maybe like 7, 8, up to 9 people would submit SCARM 1 of like a 30 to 40 person pool. So it's not an outlandish opinion anymore. Most people would say, like, all right, like put Tyranitar Skarmory first and then you're good. So the dialogue has shifted a bit. Um, that said, I most recently, as of 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever, did submit Skarm 1 Tar 2. Um, so I would generally agree that those are the top 2 Pokemon in ADV. Um, but lately, I still love Skarm, still the GOAT. My Tyranitar usage has taken a big, big hit. It might sound like hyperbole to some, but genuinely, I find it hard to fit on some teams. I feel like if you're using an offense team, like it's not a trapper like Dugtrio or Magneton, so it can't guarantee progress that way. It doesn't explode. It's not like super fast and like checks things in that way, like an Aerodactyl or a Charizard would. Um, so it's hard for offense, and then for defense, it's not a dedicated spinner, spiker. It's not a rock resist. It's not a dedicated special wall, and not a dedicated fast mon revenge killer. So it doesn't like it does a lot of things well, but it doesn't excel at any of them. I'd say, which sometimes doesn't really fit with my style. So I'm gonna quiz you again.
Oh,
I played
jeez.
24 games in Gym Invitational. Of those 24 games, how many Tyranitar do you think I used?
That's tough because I mean I know that the final four you didn't use any, but I mean it's you, so I would have thought that it's pretty high. Out of 24 games, I don't know, half, 12.
5.
Wow.
So yeah, only 5 of my 24 were
Right,
Tyranitars.
incredibly low, barely over 20%.
Yeah, and like for those who don't know, like maybe the whole tournament net usage is probably like 60 to 65%.
Of course.
Uh, and Behe probably used to like 85% or something like that. So depending on who it is, some people like rarely ever drop tar, but some people might have said I was hyperbolizing in the past when I said tar is not the best, but I put my money where my mouth is, and I did not use that much of it.
Yeah, 5 out of
Um,
24 is very, very low. That should stick out like a sore thumb.
I'm gonna fun fact you. My most used was actually Blissey, not Skarmory, and I had 13 of 24 Blissey.
Sure, because you're using it with 4A squads as well. That makes sense.
Yeah, but Skarm was second at 10. Yeah, so um, honestly,
That's
yeah,
a
it's
that's a better
crazy.
statistic. How many games did you not bring spikes?
Okay, so of the 24 games, I brought 20 spikes.
Yeah, that's
Um,
very, very,
however,
very heavy.
however, within that, and I have it listed here. That's how I know it. 10 Skarm, 6 Fori, 3 Cloyster, and 1 Smeargle. So I did diversify the spikers I brought, and like diversify my Fori sets and whatever. And I feel like even though it's like quote unquote spike teams, the way you respond to all the spikers is very different. Like a spinner like Starmie might be good into like a Peck Skarm, but it's bad into Fori, or it's good into Cloyster, and then bad into Fori, or like Magdoll could be good into Skarmory and Fori, but then it's bad into Cloyster and Smeargle. So I find it very difficult for someone to say, "Oh, I know my opponent's using spikes, and now I can just counter that." Like I don't think it's that simple, and it's pretty damn hard to punish the notion of spikes itself without accounting for all the variety within that. Um, yeah, so I guess maybe there is still that centralization element to the tier of like spikes being great. But you can still, and I use some spikeless teams and can win with those. But I still think the variety of spikers still, keeps it fresh enough that you can't really get counter teamed that easily.
So to be very clear though on where you're coming from and your intentions or whatever, so you not bringing T-Tar Skarm Swampert to the finals, that was not, oh, I want to have swag in the finals. That wasn't you trying to send a message. That wasn't you trying to make a statement. That was simply you doing what you believe is best. That was simply you doing what you think is going to lead you to win the games.
Yes, and sometimes you can get funky when you're okay. So, minor backstory for the viewers. Behe and I played. We were on winner's side, winners bracket finals. I beat him in our first best of five. Then he beats Mana, and we face again in grand final set one. He beats me, and then we have another third best of five to play in grand final set two. So we had already played 9 games at that point.
Which is a lot, by
Um,
the way. It's just a
yeah,
tangent, right? Real quick. You're on
and
record. You're on record with
yeah,
that. That like three best of fives against the same guy is
it's
just too.
tiring. It's
It, it,
it's really
it
tiring.
is too many, right? I mean, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but you wouldn't mind some kind of structural change to the tournament so you don't get in that position, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you get into such funky both mind games and fatigue when you're playing 13 ADV OU games versus one person
Yeah,
consistently with
that
no other people in between.
that's a lot.
Um, that might have played into like the I just wanted to catch him off guard factor. But no, I'm not the type of person to like sacrifice my chances of winning for statements.
And then you guys
You
were
know, like
also you guys are SPL teammates too, right? So you had some kind of familiarity with him prior to this, right?
yes. However, he played DPP in that tournament.
Sure.
So we didn't really talk much ADV. So I don't think that was as much of a factor here. Um, I think that was my first time facing him in anything though. Um, or at least, yeah, I think that might have been my first, or at least in anything serious. That was my first time facing him. Um, but okay, I will admit this. While I am generally the type not to let quote unquote my morality impact my team brings, um, so I used 2 Ninjask for Sadly CS earlier in the Invitational, and I won those games. But I was taking a gander at the YouTube comments, and I noted some disappointed fans. And I thought, Adam, my name's Adam, by the way. You can't do that to him in the grand finals. That wouldn't be good publicity. Wouldn't be a good message. ADV is beautiful. Let's end it beautifully. So it wasn't that I had a great new Ninjas team that I decided not to bring. I just avoided the rabbit hole of building new Ninjask cheese for the grand finals when otherwise it would have been a more valid option. So I'd say that's the only non-competitive angle that was there for grand finals, but otherwise it was just me trying to win, and the non-Skarmory Tyranitar Swampert just was a coincidence.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what makes the story even more fun is it's so weird to say it when we're talking about a tournament for thousands of dollars that you won, but so not only do you not bring Tyranitar Skarm Swampert, so like okay, so he must be Zap heavy, he must be Fori heavy. No, no, no. So the things that you did bring when you forsake those Pokemon, lead Dugtrio,
All right, all right.
Fori and Donphan on the same team with no
I
pursuit
I,
user,
I
Slake,
stand by lead Doug Trio. I stand by
Slaking.
it.
Oh, I want to go over all of this. The lead
Okay.
Doug, the Fori Don fan with no pursuit, fucking Slay King of all things. I mean, eh, please, how did we get there?
All right, all right. So lead Doug Trio. I made for the first grand final. Oh wait, no, I think it was winners bracket. Yeah, the first winners bracket final set for Behe. I honestly saw some ladder dude lead with Doug Trio, and it caught a few of my like Tyranitars, Jinxes,
Right, and
Raikous,
he was rated
Metachamps.
and he was rated 1100. Continue.
Yes, exactly. But occasionally, some bits of genius come from those 1100 teams. And I was inspired to take an honest look at it. I thought, okay, look, if you face the Tyranitar or whatever, beautiful, and you can like EV for max attack, Earthquake, and whatever else because you don't need like the full speed if you're at lead. Um, so if you face Tyranitar or Jinx or something, beautiful. If you face a bird like Zapdos, then you need a contingency plan, um, and like a Skarmory lead, so you need contingency plan for those things. Um, so the way I designed it was to use lead Doug Trio. Oh, and of course, if you trap Tyranitar early, you could also reset the weather and clear for a sweeper. So I had Rest Coon, Rest Lax. And the beauty of that is, one, I could pair with Blissey and Aromatherapy for them. And two, if I face a Zap Dug team, my Blissey can get trapped. But then if they beat up me, I can trap with my own Dug back, and then the rest of my team is good. And Rest Snorlax in particular is really good versus spikeless, sandless Zapdug teams. So it felt like a matchup division kind of thing. Um, and obviously, if I kill Tar early and reset the weather, then my Laxing Coon can just win. Claydol for the obvious spinning, and then I was floating between like Magneton last and like Skarmory last, like Thief maybe to help other Skarm, but Fori ended up best the double spin angle with spikes. So I made this lead Doug, Coon, Bliss, Lax, Doll, Fori team. And I got really high on the ladder with it. I thought it was amazing. I bring it game one versus Behe in Winners Finals and lose. However, being who I am, uh, I thought, you know what? This team is still fire. I don't care if it just lost. There's no way it loses twice in a row. So I bring it game two again. And I face lead Raikou. And I'm like laughing my ass off in my room at this point. That I loaded again and just face a lead Raikou. So I kill the Raikou. He traps me back with his P2, but Snorlax, Suicune kind of 6-0 the team anyway, so I win that handily. And then I guess lead Doug is forgotten about for a bit. And then come game two of Grand Final set two. Fuck it. It's time for lead Doug Trio again. This time I put a sub CM Raikou over Snorlax. But the otherwise, like, actually, fun fact, I put a Rain Dance on Blissey as well there. So on the other team, it was Thunderwave, Seismic Toss, Aromatherapy. On the Raikou one, because Raikou was faster, I feel like I didn't need T-Wave as much. I was talking with Mana, and he's like, yo, time to put Rain Dance on Blissey. And I tested it, and it was actually really good and consistent. So I ended up loading the Rain Dance Blissey Raikou variant versus him. Regarding, sorry if I'm ranting at times, by the way.
Not at all. No, the viewers love hearing your perspective.
Yeah. So it might sound memey or a joke to bring lead Doug Trio, but honestly, I brought it like 4 rounds in a row in ADV Cup and maybe won like 3 out of those 4 games too. And I won 2 out of the 3 of them with Invitational. So I think lead Doug Trio is legit if you build around it the right way. And I'm going to hit you with another statistic that I have here. Of my lead usage, Doug Trio is tied my second most used lead in Gym Invitational with Cloyster. So yeah, it's I believe in it and it's real. Regarding the Sableye, Donphan, Fortress, No Pursuit team, I have a reputation of bringing Mischievous to life to mess with the Clay Dolls, who usually Psychic Gengar and get away with it that way. Um, but occasionally, people can run Shadow Ball on their Clay Dolls if they expect Mischievous, and I had brought it the set before versus Behe. But there's also the other factor that Mischievous does not carry Will-O-Wisp in this gen. So Snorlax kind of mess with it. You can like Perish Song into Doug or like debond it, but it can't beat like both Lax and Claydol at the same time because it has to Destiny Bond both of them. Um, so I thought, you know what? I'd laddered with it a bit like a year ago. Maybe time to bust out the Sableye because I'd brought some Snorlax weak teams. Um, and I was thinking of the best ways to do it. And Fortress seemed right, Blissey, Suicune, you know, the normal thing. And then I could have done other rock resist like Jirachi, Swampert, whatever. But I ended up thinking that Donphan actually would compress the rock resist and also give me an extra spinner. Um, and
So why do you need an extra spinner?
you don't need it. You don't need it. However, it has this cool like matchup division. Okay, so normally Skarmories would run Spike, Roar, and Protect, right? Obviously, some people can drop Protect sometimes, but would you agree that's most Skarmories?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if Skarmory has to choose between Drill Peck and Toxic, Toxic Skarmory is fully walled by Fortress. So I ran Spike, HP Ghost, Rest, Rapid Spin with Aroma Blissey. That's actually the set I ran on my Dugtrio lead team too. So it kind of plays like a longer game versus Skarmgar teams, but you can spin, especially if they set the sand for you. Then Gar can't do that forever, and you rest off the Wisp and like heal your own status, and it does kind of beat Gengar long term. Um, and obviously, Toxic Skarm can't even damage it directly, so they're very hard pressed to figure out what to do. Now, if Skarmory chooses to carry Drill Peck, you have yourself the Fortress and an Impish Donphan. And Skarmory does not have the Drill Peck DP to kill both Pokemon. So if they run Skarm with no Gengar and they're using Drill Peck, you will just hard spin every time. Donphan also beats opposing Fortress. Because it runs like HP Bug, maybe HP Fire, EQ, and like if it booms you, then it can't set spikes, whatever. So Donphan super beats Fortress too, which he had used 3 times versus me in the previous set. So it seemed very smart to run Donphan here. However, I had been using a lot of Fortress too, and so Behe in his game 1 set 2 decided to use HP Fire Toxic Skarm versus me, which obviously is not ideal for my Fortress non-fan team. And then with spikes up, I couldn't really beat Mixments either, and I kind of just lost and had to sack Sableye Shitmon style, and it just died to Salamence and did nothing else. But I didn't let it rattle me, and I had other teams I liked. So then game 2, I brought out the lead Doug. So he had been using lead Zapdos like 5 out of 6
Yeah,
games versus me at that
yeah,
point.
very heavily.
Um,
Yep.
but I thought, you know what? He's not going to do it forever. It's time to bust out the lead Doug trio. Maybe he'll bring a Smeargle or a Medicham or who knows what. He leads Zapdos again, but like I said, the team was set up in a way that, like, Blissey plus Raikou or Blissey plus Snorlax or whatever, like, is kind of good versus teams that commonly lead Zap anyway. So I ended up, he used some weird special offense with Jinx and no Dugtree or whatever, and I won that handily anyway. And then I had a bunch of other teams that I was considering for later in the series. I had this lead, and not the Smeargle I used. So the Smeargle I ended up using was Spike Spore DD Boom, but I had another setup, and I was planning on like mixing them up with 2 different Smeargle sets in the same best of 5. It was Dragon Dance, Spore, Encore, and Baton Pass at the lead. And now you think some Zapdos or whatever would sub and try to bypass Smeargle Spore that way. However, if you Dragon Dance on him turn 1 as he subs, you click Encore as they try to T-Bolt their Baton Pass, they're locked into sub. Then you get the second DD. They got to switch at some point. You Spore, you pass to Marowak or Medicham, and the game kind of ends. So it has that auto win potential. If you don't face the sub lead that tries to beat you that way, it's still like a Spore can get 1 Dragon Dance, 1 Baton Pass, and +1/+1 Medicham or Marowak is still very threatening. I had some variants with like CB Metagross, so I had that idea. And then I had the Slaking team, Slacking. I know you call it Slaking, that kind of rubbed off on me. I had that team. I had the Smeargle Red Ice Doug trio. I had a Curse Amnesia Rollout Reggie Steel team ready. I had a Jolt Spikes. I was going to consider Sableye again because I kind of like doubling down on something that loses, just to not lose faith on it, or they think I won't use it again. So I had a whole bunch of ideas, but I went with this slacking offense for game 3, just because it felt good and it kind of beats anything. So I actually, that was my second slacking that tournament. Earlier in the tournament, I had used Return, Brick Break, Hyper Beam, Encore with Umbreon for Gengar. Encore I got from seeing HClat use it like a year or 2 ago. And it seemed kind of cool because like sub Pokemon beat slacking by subbing on like your switch to slacking, but you can encore them into sub and like bypass it that way. So I thought that was a really cool tech. On this team, I ran Return, Earthquake, Hyper Beam, Encore. I think Hyper Beam's really neat because it gains some 1-hit KOs versus like offensive Suicune, Milotic, maybe Zapdos, Blissey, so they can't try to like eat 1 hit and beat you that way. Now you would think that's just walled by Snorlax, walled by Gengar, and I had no pursuit anyway. But on that team, I had block Snorlax, which is first block Shadow Ball Boom. So
Wow.
they can't. So they can't wisp you. So usually a Gengar would like wisp you and then switch to like Skarmory or Tyranitar, and then like you can't actually finish off the Gengar. Um, so and they're not usually going to taunt you on a turn. You could just Shadow Ball. So you could either block on the switch and then just Shadow Ball them down that way. You curse on the switch and then block, and then you get rid of Gengar that way. And it was a Magneton team for Skarmory, so I felt like I had the good conditions to get Slacking going, even if there was no pursuit. Um, I ended up facing like a Sandless Gengarless team anyway, which Slacking absolutely feasts on. His only normal resist was Choice Band Metagross. I chipped early, Magneton did, and Slacking kind of closed out the game easily. And then game 4, I'm like, all right, he's gonna keep leading the birds, whatever. I can't get away with lead Dugtrio again, so let me lead Smeargle. Because Smeargle's worst lead matchup is like Lum Tyranitar, you'd say, right? Or let's say like a Salamancer kind of thing, but he wasn't really using that. So I figure if he leads like a Zapdos or a Skarm or like Suicune or something, like I'm fine with Smeargle versus those. They're very good matchups. So I lead Smeargle, and I had this bluff set. Like I said, like usually if someone sees Dragon Dance, they think it's going to baton pass, right? Um, like Smeargle might boom, but it doesn't usually Dragon Dance and boom. So I Dragon Dance first to like dissuade any Dugtrio Aerodactyl from coming in because I don't want to like get baton passed on. Spore his Skarm, Spike, and then I actually reveal my boom, put his Metagross in range of my Dugtrio, and then from there I feel like I was super ahead the whole game. Um, so that team ended up working perfectly. And I guess this is to say that despite losing set 1 with funky shit and losing game 1 of set 2 with funky shit, um, I still liked a lot of my ideas, and not that I didn't care about winning, but I feel like I've had a long enough career at this point that if like I know I'm good and I know I can win, and if I believe in something, I'm not gonna like you know chicken out and bring something standard just because I lost a game prior. I'm gonna stick to my guns, and if I believe in something before the set, I'm usually gonna still believe in it mid set, no matter what happens at that point. So I just went with the stuff I liked, and my games 2, 3, 4 ended up having great matchup, and I won. So here we are.
Yeah, I mean you're gonna get copied for sure because you're ABR and because you just won the tournament. So I mean certainly the more casual, the newer audience, the gym audience, you're gonna get copied. But prior to being copied, you're doing things that nobody else is doing. This is all. These are. I mean the block Snorlax set, the 4E Donphan team, the lead Duck Trio. This is all stuff that you're really blazing the trail and doing things like I said that nobody else at the high level is doing. So would it be fair to say that, in your opinion, in this 20 plus year old metagame that has been largely figured out for a long time, do you think there is still room all this time later for innovation and discovery?
Absolutely. Because I feel like even while like the pool of Pokemon available is static, um, the specific metagames and how like because at the end of the day you're not building versus the total pool of ADVOU Pokemon available, like the hundreds of them. You're building against a specific metagame, and that changes always. You could say it's cyclical in a sense, but that's always changing. And as long as what other people are using in some form, even if it's like the same Pokemon but like different variations of them are changing, what you use to counter them subsequently is also changing by default. So as long as there's new things to beat, there's new things to use to beat them, and I feel like that applies to every metagame. Maybe it's like less pronounced in something like RBY Gen 1, but many people will tell you Gen 1 is still being innovated to this day as well. So I definitely would say these tiers are not, they're not as volatile as Gen 9 right now, but there's still plenty of variety, I think, and always new things to look for.
So, where do you fall personally on that spectrum between building a generally good team just against the field? I don't give a shit what my opponent's doing, I'm just going to bring something good, versus factoring in your opponent's preferences, building not necessarily a counter team, but like something with them in mind? Are you 50-50? Do you lean more towards one or the other? How much does what you think your opponent might bring or what you think your opponent likes, how much does that factor into your team building decisions?
All right. So the first thing I'd say is that it kind of there's a balance to strike. So let's say my usual process would be try to see what I expect them to bring, either thinking about their tendencies or my tendencies. It doesn't matter how you arrive at that. You just have an idea in your head of what you expect them to bring. You think of something good into what you expect. Like, let's say you pick one or two Pokemon or like a team style. But then once you figure out that like base to go off of, you try to build the best general team possible. So let's say I'm set on using Sableye, for example's sake. I'm not going to lean into a whole Sableye team that's only good versus Snorlax teams. But once I decide to use Sableye, I'm going to make the most general Sableye team possible. So that's usually my process. Maybe if I have like a really hard read on someone, or I think I do, I'll like lean harder into the counter teaming matchup fishing thing. But I try to, after setting on my usual idea, just making it as good as possible. And obviously, if I don't have a solid idea of what I expect them to use, then I'll just bring an overall good team anyway. Which I guess you could say my, funnily enough, the league Doug Trio stuff is an example of just like a good team, and like maybe Jolt Spikes that I like put my own spin on recently is like a team I overall like those kind of things I would use regardless of what I'm expecting. Um, so it kind of depends on my mood for a given day, game, or set.
And as far as your current ADV team building philosophy, is there a core rule or a core guiding principle that plays a big role in the way that you approach building in this tier?
Uh, Funnily enough, you mentioned that. I very recently, you know, in the ADV Discord, there's like a Whispers channel where you can give your hot meta takes and whatever. Um, I listed out like ADVOU rules July 2024 edition, and someone was kind enough to make a graphic of it. So I'm going to send that to you on Discord. These are ABR's 9 laws of team building.
Okay, but these aren't
And
but these aren't trolly though, right? Because my recollection of
no,
the
these are real. These are real.
okay,
These
because
are
my,
real.
my
These are real. Yeah.
recollection of the Whispers channel was that it was always
Yes.
bullshit like, oh, Aerodactyl is the best rock resist and that kind of crap, and
Yes. Okay. Okay.
I never looked at that channel.
No, so these are things I adhere to like 99% of the time. They still leave a lot of diversity within that, obviously, but okay, I'm just gonna read them out because your viewers are not looking at them. The first one is Tyranitar plus Magneton is not allowed. So ideologically, there's no reason why you'd think those Pokemon can't be paired, but in my opinion, a Magneton team leaves severe defensive holes, which is justifiable sometimes. But Tyranitar compounds a fighting, water, and ground weakness that Magneton teams have. And it's not a set, physical wall, special wall, whatever. So I don't think Tyranitar plus Magneton make good teams. Another rule would be that like your quote unquote suicide leads into tar, like Jinx or Raikou or things that just like chip tar and then immediately Doug Trio. You either need spin to beat the follow up spikes, or you need weather change to like quote unquote justify the dead tar. So these are like, I don't follow these like on a sheet of paper like, oh, did my team follow these rules? But I guess this was more like what goes on in my head anyway. And I try to make sure it's worthwhile what I'm trying to accomplish with the team. I don't want to like spread myself too thin or like sacrifice something that should be covered, like a basic rock resist or whatever. So another one is like you must like a Skarmory or a defensive team should either have a plus defensive nature rock resist or 2 rock resists. So that kind of thing. So these are just little. So I don't like intentionally look at these and follow these, but this is a good example of like how my brain works when it comes to team building. I guess in general, I'd say my Skarmory or Spike teams are more set in the roles they follow, like physical wall, special wall, which is almost always Blissey, and then like you need a fast Pokemon like Moltres, Charizard, Dugtrio, or Dactyl. You need like an anti-spike plan, so either you're floating above it, or you're spinning, or Magneton, or whatever. But I feel like offenses because the game's being played at a faster pace, you could be more loose with the quote unquote roles you're filling, if that makes sense.
So we've spent a lot of time in this interview up to this point talking about your Callous Invitational and of course Gym Invitational career. So that leads to the question, looking back on the totality of your ADV career, whether it's Callous Invitational, Gym Tour, Classic, whatever the case may be, is there any player in particular that you always really enjoyed playing against and that you feel like you had good matches against and you liked the way they played, so on and so forth? And then the flip side of that coin, is there anybody that you really didn't like playing against or that you have a bad record against or you always had a tough time with? Who comes to mind for guys that you really liked playing against and really didn't like playing against?
We're talking ADV still mostly.
ADV.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone who I like always beat an ADV sets or always lose to an ADV set. So I don't think that part of the question applies. Um, Honestly, I feel like I've faced a diverse batch of people. Like every year, I feel like I faced like there's no one I really. Maybe I faced M Dragon twice and beat him twice. I don't think there's anyone else I faced twice besides like same tournament grand final stuff. So I don't think I have like long term trends. In terms of specific sets, I remember as like being particularly tense. It's the H clat one in CI5. And probably all the sets for Behe this tour were most intense. Um,
How about playing
yeah,
against
but
a friend? You like that? Don't like that? Like if you get paired against like
I,
Star or
I don't
Mana, how does that
no.
do it for you?
I actually really don't like that.
Yeah, most
'Cause
people
I feel like
don't.
these are people. Yeah, I talk about like my ideas with otherwise. Um, so it's kind of like muddies the waters when it's like, do you still do your thing anyway? Do you have to do something different? Like, what do they expect you to do? And it gets kind of annoying and mind gamey when it's someone you're really close with otherwise. So yeah, not a fan of that. Obviously, you make do and whatever, but if I can avoid it, I'll avoid it.
So you've been around long enough, played all these ADV tournaments to see ADV go through quite a few changes, and you were even part of some of those changes. You were a pretty vocal voice with some of these votes. There's baton pass changes, Sandvale. There's the whole complex bands thing. We can kind of tackle this one at a time, but starting with baton pass, because I know that you had pretty strong feelings about it. You've used some baton pass. You've certainly played against some baton pass. H-Clat, prominent example, but not the only one. What what do you think about where we stand now? Is it finally right, or have we gone too far? I mean, I know you. I can speak for you on this one. You obviously think that like old school ingrained Smeargle five pass nonsense that obviously needed to go way too strong.
I
But
think 99% of people would agree on that part at least. Yeah,
right, I didn't feel the need to stop and ask because like
yeah,
that
yeah.
that that part's clear. But where are we now? I mean, are you happy with where BP is? Would you just ban it completely or just keep it to dry pass? I mean, what should happen with ADV baton
Uh,
pass?
so I feel like we definitely have not gone too far. We could debate the are we good slash should we go further part, but the only things we've like okay, so flashback 2021, the mead pass I was talking about that was way too strong and clearly needed a nerf. I think the only thing we quote unquote lost from that point is like Calm Mind Celebi plus Agility Zapdos on the same team. But to me, that was cheesy bullshit anyway, so I don't mind that it's gone now. So we haven't gone too far. I'd say mostly these days it's not as big of a problem as it used to be. But at the same time, I don't think it offers anything good. I don't think it's good for the tier or metagame that I can still, even though I can't SD with my Ninjas, that I can still Ninjas past to sub Combine Draw tier, like then SD with my Marowak itself, or like people use Agility, Zapdos to Marowak, and then Middleman with Celebi, and like it's not foolproof and it can definitely lose games, but I just don't think it's a healthy interactive element of the metagame. I would at minimum ban Speed Pass, which would leave things like Calm Mind, Baton Pass, Celebi around, but at the same time, that can feel like cheesy bullshit too sometimes. Or, I mean, I don't know. I fluctuate between like it's cheesy bullshit, ban it, or it's not that good anyway, which you could say don't ban it, but like it's also like not really collateral then either. So I feel like no matter which way I'm thinking, I don't really view that as like a bad thing to lose. I would probably just ban stat pass and keep the move baton pass plus substitutes allowed, which is currently what DPP and black and white do. So I know that would be allowed from like a larger tiering philosophy too. I would not mind losing Zapdos agility, Celebi Calm Mind, or Ninjask speed at this juncture. Yeah, I would be okay with those being gone.
So when it came up back in CI4, because we were back and forth on the Sandvale ban, and it got used during play-ins, and then I took a vote among the players. Hey, do we want to allow this in the main tournament or not? And the answer ended up being yes. We did have Sandvale in CI4, but
And
yeah,
me over here, I I used it twice, and I super lucked shortage using it. I want to say my Gligar dodged like a Gengar Ice Punch and two Celebi hits or something. It was crazy. Sandville was not fair, and I definitely pushed hard for its ban because it just felt like total bullshit to play against.
now, whether it's Sandvale or otherwise, do you have any amount of openness to what they call complex bans? So, like with Sandvale, for example, would you have allowed you can't sub plus Veil or you can't stat boost plus Veil? You get to keep Cacturn, but you don't get the bullshit elements of it, or just fuck that. It had to go one way or another.
Yeah, because I honestly feel like if you take those half measures, complex bans, like on one angle, it could just be like ineffective and like yes, they can't substitute and fish for a miss, but like if you're trying to revenge kill a Gligar and you miss, it still like kind of feels bullshit anyway. Um, so in that sense, I wouldn't appreciate the measure. But on the other hand, I'm a bit of a. I feel like there has to be like a good reason to instate a complex ban. You take something like RBYOU sleep. You could say sleeping six Pokemon is obviously broken, so we should just ban sleep moves, which I think is a valid view. But like at the end of the day, people think RBYOU is healthier with sleep around. So it has a sleep clause. It's had a sleep clause forever, and that's an example of complex ban. And I think like there's just cause in that it does enough good for the metagame that you can justify it. But I wouldn't say the middling baton pass strategies or Sandvale are like important enough to justify it, if that makes sense.
But you're open potentially to a complex ban, right? Because I mean, you just gave us for an example,
Yeah.
you would keep Baton Pass but get rid of Speed Pass. That would also be a complex ban, right? So I mean,
Yes. I guess for me, the other factor there is that it has some inertia of being done historically. So like it's already the case in two other generations that I play as well. So I don't think like bigger picture it matters to Smogon to have a third tier with that rule set.
but
Uh,
you're not inherently opposed conceptually to a complex ban, right? You view it as a case by case basis.
yeah, I'd say it just has to it's kind of vibes based, case by case, but yeah, I guess just kind of depends. Has to be worth it.
And you don't necessarily believe that the rules for one tier or one generation especially have to necessarily line up with the next. So like what DPP does, for example, really doesn't matter for ADV. Do you agree with that?
No, I'd agree in the sense that we don't have to follow them, but it's probably easier to pass something that's already being done. Because, like, let's say sometimes there's something like ADV players, like themselves or a small group of them want, and then there's something like GSC players want, but maybe like it doesn't fit within the larger Smogon tiering philosophy. However, if in this case you could point to another generation and say, look, they're already allowed to do it, then they kind of have to let you do it too. Um, so that's why I allude to it. Not because we have to follow DPP or black and white, but because it's like historical precedence and like therefore I know for a fact it would pass.
So a couple other quick hot button issues as far as ADV banning. Would you ban Sand Attack?
So on one hand, it offers no competitive good, and you could ban it. However, my wariness in banning it would be that if we ban, can you still hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just accidentally shut my phone for a second. My wariness would come from the fact that if you ban Sand Attack, that's a slight nerf to Ninjask, and then people might be more reluctant to banning further baton pass, which I think should be banned. So that's why I'm against. I don't want people to like think that's enough and stop, so to speak. Because when I used Ninjask in Invitational, they had already banned sand attack and such. And I used an adamant set with sub Silverwind HP Rock Baton Pass. And I won twice with it. I still think it's very effective. So I don't want I just don't want people to think that sand attack is sufficient. Maybe like after Baton Pass. But on the other hand, like if Baton Pass is nerfed further, then like a sand attack ban is unnecessary because like Baton Pass is the only time people use it. So it just feels like it's miss targeting the actual issue.
Would you ban bright powder?
Fun fact: it is already banned.
Right. Do you agree with it?
Yes, yeah,
How about quick
I
claw?
think I think the luck items, like if like a hydro pump misses or like you get frozen, those are kind of like unavoidable. Obviously you choose to hydro pump or whatever, but quick claw, King's Rock just feel like very they don't do anything besides luck. Um, Thunder Wave slows things down, so I just don't think those items should be allowed when their sole purpose is to cause those chances. And you can't really like have counterplay. If something boosts its speed and then has King's Rock, like you can't really do anything besides pray you don't get flinched. Obviously, newer gen's priority or whatever, but yeah, I just don't think they make for like a reasonable level to account for.
Do you agree with the swagger ban?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what tiers have banned it so far. I feel like some have, some haven't. And I know it has like different mechanics in some tiers, but yeah, when it does apply, I agree with that.
So is there anything in ADV that we haven't already covered that you either think should be banned, currently is not, or vice versa, something that we have banned now that you don't think needs to be, maybe we should unban it?
Definitely no unbans. We touched on Baton Pass, Sand Attack. The only thing I'd consider, which I can guarantee McMegan mentioned to you, is sleep.
How
Um,
predictable.
I don't feel strongly about it though. Like, I don't really use Breloom. Hypnogar is bullshit, but not common. Um, Jinx and Smeargle are like valid meta things, but at other times also like I wouldn't mind if they got nerfed. Maybe it's like okay now, so I probably wouldn't push for it, but I don't know what I'd vote if it did come up.
So obviously people watching my channel are going to know you more for ADV since, that's what I cover, but it's not like you forgot how to play all the other things that you play. I remember you playing GSC and SPL. I think in a recent SPL you played RBY. You
Yeah,
obviously
last SPL I played RBY and RS, so
right, and you
yeah,
have a
still playing those.
Gen 6, Gen 7 reputation. I mean, you play a lot of things. So I mean, how do you view yourself? I mean, do you consider yourself an ADV main? Are you a generalist? I mean, is ADV even your strongest tier?
I mean, I would say ADV is my strongest. Even before this most recent tournament, I feel like it's the tier I played the most. Like, it's the only one I really play year round. Um, and that's because of ADV is distinct and having these, prestigious and big money invitationals. Um, so yeah, I'd say it's my best, but I want to say last 18 months exclusively is when I really started learning RBY. So like that was one of my main focuses for a while. Um, and I feel like eternally Gen 6 and 7 or S and SM are my most well versed. Yeah, just like because if historically I played them so much and I still like keep in touch with trends and like even if I don't play them often, build for teammates and stuff. So I stay very on top of those. But yeah, ADV is my main, I'd say.
I guess I'll phrase this a different way. Let's say that you had a very important match coming up and whatever 10 grand for the winner. You had 2 weeks of preparation. What OU tier would you choose for that match to be in?
Oh, ADV for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that's if you really had to put your money down on your own ability, ADV is what you would put the wager on.
Yeah, I'd say, funnily enough, even though I started in non-preview gens, uh, especially recently, and now I mostly play classic gens, gens 1 to 5. I think no team preview is way better. And it's a skill set I like to see rewarded when you can like figure things out and deceive your opponent with what you have remaining and whatnot. Um, so I think like that would give me an edge versus someone I'm better than that I get to hide my team, so to speak.
Is there any amount for you of being like, I've won this tour twice. I don't have anything to prove anymore in ADV. Are you kind of like tired of it, or thinking, it's time to move on to other things, or do you see yourself continuing to play a lot of ADV going forward?
No, I mean I still like enjoy playing it a lot, and I've like laddered since winning Invitational even, so like I still enjoy it in that sense. Um, no, maybe I wouldn't be playing for the same like oh I need to show them the best kind of thing. But it would just be like it would start as joining for fun, and then once I get deeper in the tournament, the competitiveness in me would kick in. So
Ah,
I still playing ADV.
time for my favorite question in all these interviews, because like I try to tailor the interview questions to who it is I'm talking to. They're not all the same, but I ask this question every time, and it's always fascinating to hear the answers. So, first of all, could you please define your criteria? Everyone has their own idea of what it means. What's your criteria for the greatest ADVer of all time? And then who is the greatest ADVer of all time, and where do you fit in that conversation?
Oh boy. Um, okay. Okay, the criteria will have to include some combination of Callous / Gym Invitationals, SPL ADV, and ADV Cup. I'd say
Okay, so
those are like the big
tournament
ones.
tournament results. Okay.
Yes, you know what? Yeah, you can't not play those and be the ADV goat. Um, However, depending on what criteria you highlight more, you'd get a different answer. So, for example, if you go by just the invitationals, linear, won twice, 3 money finishes within just 4 years, too. For me, I guess it's over 6 years to do that. But, someone like McMegan has won 3 ADV Cups in 9 editions. I guess 3 out of 10 now, but that's still crazy consistency. I had an 9-1 SPL playing ADV, or I guess 8-1 for ADV games. McMegan has some crazy ADV SPLs. Someone like Linear, who has the great invitationals, like doesn't have the great SPL history. So it feels, normally, okay, if you're talking like overall Pokemon, I would like say myself, I'm the GOAT, no question. I don't hesitate to say that. However, it feels weird saying that about myself in ADV when like there's so much history to it before I even started playing. So it's like in my head, it's like, how does someone who's only played the last 6 years of it, how can he be the goat of like a 20-plus-year-old metagame? So that's where I'd hesitate to put myself. But I guess if I were to be objective and look at results, I am up there in ADV goats, if I must say. If you asked me to name another person to be the ADV goat, I would say McMegan. Just because he has I don't think he's never won an invitational. But the 3 ADV Cups plus SPLs and like general meta trendsetter, um, all around, and like my overall view of him, I would say McMegan is.
But taking modesty out of it, do you view yourself, no matter what, as a top three ADVer of all time?
Yes, I could say that. I wouldn't like, think if someone else disagreed, I wouldn't say like, nah, you're like, okay, if someone said I was not top three in like overall singles, I would say they're crazy. I wouldn't get heated about it, but I'd say they're crazy. If someone said an ADV, I could tolerate the reasoning behind it. Like it kind of makes sense to me.
Where would you
But if I'm,
where do you draw the line for ADV? Where it's just this is total bullshit. Like, are you top five, top 10? Where is the absolute worst case scenario? Where do you
I gotta
fall
be,
for
I
ADV?
gotta be, I gotta be top 10 at minimum.
For
Just
top
yeah,
10 for sure. Okay.
yeah. I would. Yeah, I think it. I mean, it depends on someone's perspective. They've like an M Dragon who's comparing me to the ADV Legends of 2005. I don't think he's gonna put me top three. but I can respect that. But if you're asking me to rank, I'll put myself top 3.
Yeah, going across the era is very difficult. I mean, how do you compare like you against like Veteran and Love, who you never played against, or like even Husk, Goofball, going back that far, G80. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
that's a very challenging. When I do these lists, I always kind of separate eras, but when you start to cross eras, it gets messy. But the skill set is just so different now. I mean, I talked about this. I don't want to go too far off track. I talked about this with Marco a bit and a little bit with Dexa as well. It's my belief. You can tell me if you agree or not. I don't know that the top end today is necessarily better or worse. I think the good players have always been the good players, but I think the average ADV player, I think, for example, whoever the 200th best ADV player is in the world right now, I think that guy today is way better than they were 8, 10 years ago, whatever, before all the resources today, the teams, the guides, the videos. There's so much content. It feels like right now is as good of a time as there has ever been to jump into ADV and not suck at it. You're going to be decent no matter what because there's so much out there if you put the effort in. Do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for the past eras themselves, but it makes sense to me, and I feel like that's a big part from people like you and Jim also who help grow the ADV scene. And like the ADV ladder, for example, like has gotten as high as like 1991 or something. But there are some other old gens that cap at like 1500 sometimes.
Correct.
Yeah, so like the ladder player base size, like the tournaments, how prestigious they are, like ADV has a lot more influx and hype than other old gens, and I think that'll lead to the 200th best player, or whatever, being better than the 200th best player used to be.
So, what advice would you give my viewer right now who's listening to this, who looks up to you and goes, "My God, ABR is so good. He's got all this success." Someone who wants to replicate what you've done. What would you tell the younger, less experienced ADVer listening to this who wants to do what you have done?
All right, and I'd say this advice applies to not just ADV, but one, always think of yourself as the goat. You should never look at another human and say he's better than me. Um, Maybe it's some very niche specific thing in life, but when it comes to Pokemon gaming competition, I'd say when it comes to competition, you got to think you're the best to be the best. And I think that mindset has helped me because even when I was starting out in 2014, I would go around telling people I'm better than everybody. And yeah, I think when you convince yourself of that, it's easier to live it. The other thing I'd say is don't be scared to blaze your own path in terms of like what you like to use, how you like to play. You don't want to just be a replica of what people used to do. You want to carve out your own footprint and your own idea. And when you come up with your own ideas and like get to working on them yourself, you end up having a deeper understanding than someone who just copies what the people before them did. So, stay true to yourself and your own beliefs.
So what's left for you, man? I mean, you have such a big resume with Pokemon, like you said. I mean, you consider yourself possibly, or not even possibly. You're pretty straightforward with it. You consider yourself the overall best Pokemon player competitively. Period. So I mean, if you really believe that about yourself, what's even left for you? How much longer do you see yourself sticking around the competitive game? I mean, you said you're only 26. You're not an old man like myself, but
I was gonna insult your age if you didn't do it yourself. So
yeah, I
I'm glad you
mean,
mentioned it.
yeah. I mean, I might be
How
old.
old are you again? I forget.
I'll be 35 in 2 weeks. Yeah.
All right, you're fine. You're a young spring chicken.
Well, not in real life, man. I don't feel like I have the free time that I used to, but
Okay, so touching on that, I think okay, so like in 2017, 2018, I joined literally every tournament that came my way. Um, Maybe about like 3, 4 years ago, I stopped doing that, and like maybe in like recent years, I'll only join say like SPL World Cup Classic and ADV Invitational, like yours. So that was like it for the whole year for me. Um, I think that like mostly worked for me. But I guess as time goes on, like I like playing the game. Um, it's fun. I have moments I love it that are great. Um, but it can sometimes feel like a chore. Like especially with these like best of fives or whatever, like when you're like in the late 10 stages of tournaments, like I get home from work, I just want to like chill, go out, watch a Netflix show, whatever. Then it's like, oh, like I got to build a team. Like, I got to prep for the weekend. And it kind of feels like homework or a chore at that point, which I don't like that feeling. Maybe actually playing or like the artistic expression of team building, like that kind of stuff is still fun, but the having a set schedule you need to prepare for and play at that time can feel a bit like work sometimes. So at least right now, my plan would be to just like I'm in classic playoffs. Funnily enough, first Behe confirmed again. We will be playing another best of five in the next 2 weeks. Uh, so yeah, I'm gonna finish out those playoffs. From there, I've played every or managed every SPL since SPL 7, and we're heading up on like 16. Um, I don't know that I want to join it. I like might. Who knows how I'll feel in December? But like I'm genuinely considering skipping it just because I feel like my brain kind of just like wants to chill and take a break with it and like chip in and ladder when I feel like. I'm still going to be around like on Discord in whatever communities I'm a part of, just because that's you know a lot of my where a lot of my good friends are. But I feel like right now my brain's like take a break, Adam. Let yourself rest a bit. Maybe like last year I was more, I don't know, like mm, tense, but like occupied with like my perception as the goat or like in competitive Pokemon history, and like I gotta keep going, bury the lead, other people can catch me, blah blah blah. But right now I'm feeling more chill with that. If someone else gets more trophies, good for them, so be it. I could definitely be happy with what I've done up to this point, even if that person does come along. Um, and I feel like as long as so it's more so right now about like if I enjoy it and have the time for it and it doesn't feel like a chore, then I'll play. But I wouldn't be playing for like legacy alone at this point, so to speak.
But short to medium term, you're not going anywhere. I mean, that doesn't mean you're going to be in every tournament or playing all the time, but it's safe to
No,
say that
no.
you're still going to be around in a few years. You've got a number of years in competitive Pokemon still ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, I literally just like after Gym Invitational, like agreed to play the ADV Revival tournament, which is like the open one. Um, a big part of joining that for me was though because I got I placed third in that last year, so I get like a free skip to the top 32. So I get like a few months off before that, so like that's like an easy join to me, and I can win more money. And I won money in it last year, and it's fun. I love ADV. So I just joined that literally, and I still have Classic playoffs to play, so I'm not like retired or anything. Uh, I just feel like I need to be more conscious about what I sign up for and like if it's something I actually want to do specifically.
So, what do you still want to accomplish, Pokemon or otherwise?
Well, by otherwise, do you mean like what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, outside of Pokemon, but I don't want to pry into your personal life. We all have goals and dreams.
No, I mean I'll just say I work a job. I started a master's program a few weeks ago, so those keep me pretty busy. Like I said, like I get home from that and I don't like. Sometimes I okay like Pokemon's a hobby and I love it, but I guess when you get to the top level of it, like can start to feel like an unhobby at times. Like laddering is a hobby, but like preparing for tournaments like a job. Um, I'm gonna give a quote that my grandfather gave me, my wise grandfather. He said, you work and you retire and you play golf. However, if you retire and you play golf every day, golf becomes your new job. So, even if things start out as hobbies or fun, if you do them constantly and you're really concerned with how you're doing at them, it still can feel like a job. So, you got to be conscious about where you apply your time. Um, I, hmm.
What about in Pokemon? Is there something that you have not
No, no,
wanted
oh,
to
sorry.
come?
I got off track.
Yeah.
No. Um, uh, no, I don't think I don't think my playing at this point is based on goals, so to speak. Like, obviously, it would be nice, like, oh, I win Classic, get my fifth individual trophy, like, cement further in the Hall of Fame, blah, blah, blah. Like, those are nice things. and I would be very hype about doing them. But like if that was my sole goal, like then I would like join every tournament, like grind those. But I don't have the, I guess, short term motivation for those. So it's more so just about like what opportunity presents itself and feels realistic without being, too much of like a personal burden to put myself through.
I feel like we've been pretty comprehensive here. This is certainly one of the longer interviews, which I'm sure my viewers will appreciate. But to give you the final opportunity here, is there anything else that you would like to tell those viewing this?
Mm, I guess I would just say, not on the topic of Pokemon. Uh, Remember that life is beautiful and wonderful, and the highs and happiness will always return to you if you're patient enough.
It's a good note
A
to
nice
end on.
positive. Yeah,
I
keep
do
that in mind.
I do have one final question before we end. I was gonna put this in the script. I don't know how this got lost. Is it true that you're 5'5"?
Okay. Yes, it's true. But
I didn't think you were really gonna answer. Thought you were gonna tell
no,
me
I
to
don't
go.
mind.
Thought you were
No,
gonna tell me to.
honestly, no.
Thought you were gonna tell me to fuck off.
No, it's true. But no, my
Perfect ending.
my rationalization for that, I don't need one, but my rationalization, the thing I like to tell people who would ask that is that it would be unfair if in addition to all my other amazing qualities, I was also 6'5".
That
So
perfect ending.
it's fair. Yeah. No, life is beautiful though.
No, seriously though, man, I appreciate your time. You're not easy to get on the mic. We talked off air before this that the last time you think you were on YouTube, voice wise, was 5 years ago with BKC. That's not easy.
Probably. Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate you being here, man. I know the viewers are gonna love it. Thanks a ton for your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Much love.